Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Opto Sessions. I've got Mike Venuto on the show, CIO and Co-Founder of Tidal Financial Group and Portfolio Manager of BLOK, an actively managed blockchain ETF. How are you doing, Mike?
Very good. Excited to be here again.
Yeah, it's been, as we were saying, 3 or 4 months since we last caught up, and a lot happening in the industry, so obviously there's always things to talk about. So I thought we could start by just talking about the Bitcoin halving. Obviously, something that's on, well, anyone is in crypto, knows about the halving. And we're coming round to that time again. I believe it's April next year. So the big question is, do you perceive it as the catalyst that everyone thinks it will be for the next bull market in cryptocurrencies? Or is it potentially a non-event? I've heard a few people talking about it just not having that much impact. What are your thoughts on the matter?
Well, so it's kind of impossible for it to not have an impact, right?
Yeah.
Because, it is how the miners are compensated. And if they're getting half as much Bitcoin, well, that's a big haircut, right? Knowing you're going to expend essentially the same amount of resources to receive half as much of the commodity that you're producing, well, that's got to shake out the market in some way, right? It's either the price has to go up or the amount of people mining has to go down. Like, there's all kinds of things that are built into the original Satoshi code and concept that, you know, kind of are a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Now, what does that mean for price? Because that's the real question that everybody wants to know, right? Like,
Yeah.
does number go up? And the answer to that one is I have no idea. I can say historically it has. Does it go up, 3 months before or 3 months after or 6 months after or 9 months after? When does this all come together? What else is going on in the world at that time? Is there monetary easing? Is there monetary tightening? Is there a war? Is there another plague? What do we got, right? Like, what's on your bingo card? Do we have aliens that we actually believe in? Like, like who knows? So I don't have the answer to whether or not the short-term behavior of Bitcoin is going to change massively in relation to the halving. I do know that historically it has correlated, and I do know that over time it will have a major impact because the system's self-regulating.
And do you think this time might be different, or which you're sort of alluding to, may as a possibility, might be because it's Bitcoin's got so many eyes on it nowadays, and a different types of investors. You've got institutional investors, retail investors, that maybe it's different to how it has been before, and so you can't say it's just going to react in the same way every halving.
I mean, there's so much money on the sidelines. There's so much money earning 5.5% in money markets and whatnot right now. And there's so little, so tiny amount of institutional adoption at this point. Um, and to me, from what I can tell, or from the tea leaves that I'm looking at, sentiment going into this one is so negative um, that the upside surprise power here is just such an amazing coiled spring, right? There's so
Yeah.
much kinetic energy built up because there hasn't been this hype. There hasn't been really that much good news, right? The biggest drag on this has been regulators, right? Like, so, so I don't think this time's going to be that different.
Yeah.
Um, if it was going to be different, it could be a more violent surprise up
Okay, I see.
because,
It's
you
been
know,
held down.
it's been held down, and you're right. There's a lot more eyes on it, but most of them haven't bought,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
when number goes up, they get excited.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, one of the reasons why there's been a bit of sort of uncertainty around at the moment is the Fed and predicting what their decision making will be. And do you believe in this sort of new, well, it's relatively new, I suppose, that I'm saying higher for longer, essentially at the last meeting, which the active markets have sort of tried to sort of change and adopt that new policy. But is this something that they're able to actually commit to? Do you think next year and the year after that?
Their commitment will only last as long as the market allows them to be committed, right?
Yeah.
So right now, whether through skill or luck, they've orchestrated what looks like the first soft landing in history, right? Um, if it stays soft, they'll stay higher for longer. If
Yeah.
it starts to get a credit crisis, any kind of event that really collapses the market, the doves will fly right back in.
Yeah.
So, to me, it's just rhetoric. I I wouldn't put much faith in their commitment. Um,
It's
I
been
think it's something
surprising
that,
though.
yeah, it has been surprising, but it's also been lucky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think? I mean, the economy's been pretty resilient, right? I mean, we're still. I mean, I don't know what your perspective on it is, but even the job numbers seem to be relatively stable at the moment. We had a little uptick in unemployment rate, but nothing too destructive. I mean,
Yeah. So it's strange because stock market in the U.S. is up. Well, stock markets globally are basically up. Bonds are
yeah,
pretty flat, except maybe the last couple of days they kind of wiped out whatever they had for the year. Long duration is disaster, but that's because they believe they're going to be higher for longer.
yeah,
So that all these little numbers say everything's pretty good. Um, you talk to individual business owners and you hear pulling back our marketing budgets, we're pulling back our spending. So it does feel like the soft recession is occurring. It's just not making it into the numbers because it's masked by that Magnificent Seven or the AI boom, right?
yeah,
Like, so you know, um, you have about half the stocks down 20% from their highs a year ago,
yeah,
right? Like, so that doesn't sound like this bull run that the numbers suggest exist. But you take away Nvidia and Meta, and all of a sudden these indexes would not look quite so spectacular.
yeah, yeah. Especially the Russell, I think, has really not gone anywhere for quite some time.
Yeah, small caps have not really participated, and I mean it's strange. Like everybody thought, well, once they take the monetary easing away, the hegemony of the top five, top seven stocks will disappear. It won't be this passive beta rally anymore. Value will return, small caps will return, emerging markets will return. None of that has occurred, right? We
Yeah,
had money pumping in the system, and there was top five, seven stocks. Now we have money pulled out of the system, top five stocks. Um, so doesn't seem sustainable to me. The world always mean reverts. Uh, I just don't know what the catalyst is. I don't know if it's we have to tear it down to build back up something normalized,
yeah,
or the soft landing becomes a soft realization of value again. We'll see.
yeah. Interesting times for sure.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm so glad we're with these 4 rainy days. We've got your audience all humped up right now, right? Like
yeah,
they're all excited after this gloomy picture of who knows what's going to happen. I mean, I think it's worse to tell people to expect uncertainty
yeah,
than to expect a down market or an up market. At least those they can get excited about on one side or another. I'm sorry, audience, that what we're facing is a wall of uncertainty.
yeah. It is until there's some distinctive change in the numbers. It seems like we just don't know, do they? Nobody knows what the Fed's going to do. Um, I've been so surprised at the bond prices, though, to be honest, because they're meant to be some of the smartest traders as far as people, other thought leaders talk about bond traders as some of the smartest traders, and they're going. I mean, they're not the only things moving the market. So I know that there's other forces weighing in there. But even you mentioned the long-term rates, just crazy how high they've got now. Um,
Yeah, usually this is a symptom and not a cause. When the bond markets move like this, it's a realization of some sort of event, credit event that is permeating up and it's not clear yet to everybody what it is.
Yeah.
It usually shows itself after the damage is done.
Yeah. Like always. Well, I thought we could go back to the Bitcoin price now, and
Sure.
I just had a quick question about global liquidity and how do you think there's a really strong link there between the price of Bitcoin and global liquidity, essentially?
Um, so it's one of those things again that's almost like a cycle or a wave, right? So when we have a lot of global liquidity, um, Bitcoin becomes a risk asset for people and they want to participate in it, right?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I've got tons of liquidity, I can be a speculator. On the other end of the spectrum, when there's a ton of global liquidity, you have demonetization or deflation. What's the right word? Disintermediation of currency, right? You have devaluation,
Yeah.
and then people tend to look to Bitcoin as a monetary policy that's disinflationary. So it's kind of like at the peak of each wave, right? At the peak of liquidity, people are getting excited about Bitcoin. Then as liquidity dries up in the middle, they tend to run away. And then when it's back at the end and they're pulling it away, pulling that liquidity away, all of a sudden people are back into the game, right? It's kind of like Bitcoin's a play on the extremes. In the middles, people tend to not focus as much.
Yeah. And is this something you actively monitor? Um, do you feel like it's influential to the ETF, or is it something that you look at, or you're not concerned with it? And if you do look at it, how do you measure the
Yeah,
global?
so I take a very long-term view, right? So with BLOK, we're an actively managed fund, so we're able to up exposure when when sentiment seems to be positive for the overall blockchain industry, which is by far dominated by Bitcoin, um, and lower it at other times when sentiment is off. Now, sentiment can be a question of what's going on in cryptocurrencies or blockchain and Bitcoin, or it could be what's going on in traditional finance in terms of valuations and monetary policy and whether or not things are trading at 25 PEs or 15 PEs and things like that. Um, for us, the the short-term price movements of Bitcoin really mean nothing, right? Like we have a
Mhm.
thesis of where it's going over time and participation's pretty easy. For us, we're mostly managing downside, right? Like getting the upside of cryptocurrency or Bitcoin blockchain, not too hard, right? So we like to say the touchdowns come easy. It's the sacks that we're good at avoiding, right?
Yeah.
It's taking the gains when things seem exuberant. It's hiding out when uh, when everybody's running for the door, and then it's very easy to layer back in because the runs are so violent to the upside, right?
Yeah.
It's easy to participate.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, and coming back to the dollar, um, do you long term? Do you think it's going to devalue a lot long term, based on the fact that if this model plays out again, where the economy gets into trouble, the Fed starts printing, easing again, which is just devaluing the currency further, which is, I mean, even though the dollar's been going up against other currencies globally more recently, I think if you looked at it as a denominator, it has been decreasing, like devaluing itself, even though it's going up against other currencies. It's like a global devaluation of currency due to the printing of money. Is that something you believe that long term will cause another asset bubble, similar to what we've seen already? Because it seems like that was one of the main causes of that.
The the policies of moving off of some sort of standard, a gold standard, or any kind of discipline, and just being able to go into further and further and further into debt, it's just not a sustainable thing, right? Like it's the demise of almost every major culture, right? Is devaluing the currency. I don't see how um, they change that policy. I think that the hope is that technology, AI, something creates so much production that we essentially softly inflate our way out of these debts.
Okay.
Without that, the devaluation to a point of hyperinflation and the end of the dollar dominance is inevitable. Um, I believe like even politicians have bought the AI hype that you know universal basic income will just be produced and we'll all be in this utopia. Um, you know, I like humans. I hope we can get there.
Yeah.
But if it's going to be a rocky road, so I'm going to own quite a bit of Bitcoin during that time.
So in the scenario where there is obviously hyperinflation, Bitcoin as a hedge against that, will do very well in theory. With the other scenario, with a massive increase in productivity, how would it be impacted in that scenario?
It's really interesting because I do think there is an intersection with blockchain and AI that once the hype is done and people come back to like listening to people who actually think about this stuff, like Dr. Stuart Russell, who's actually thought through AI instead of just does the commercials that we constantly see now, and we've moved into the cycle where every major company is going to announce an AI initiative and all that sort of stuff. I do think it's life changing. The intersection though with blockchain is for AI to actually be meaningfully changing the world,
Yeah.
it has to be somewhat decentralized. If it's not, then it just probably results in the end of the world, right? Uh, the AI needs anxiety, it needs decentralization, and that's where the intersection with blockchain is kind of obvious.
Right.
It can be the commerce platform within AI. It can be um, a way to distribute knowledge to AI or data that the AI can use. But I don't see a world where AI creates utopia using general purpose AI in a utopia where it's centralized. That just I don't see how that's possible.
Yeah. And
So
so
there,
this.
yeah. Sorry, I know we're a little off topic, but it's kind of hard not to look at this today, right? Like
Yeah,
it's
yeah, no, it's
just
really interesting.
permeating.
Is this something you're really keeping on top of for
Yeah.
Block?
Well, so we keep on top of it for Block. We're also partners in another ETF with the ticker Chat that's actively managed by Roundhill, and it was an idea that we worked on with them. So I see the intersections because I work on multiple different ETFs, right? Today,
Yeah.
our platform services 117 ETFs and almost $9 billion. Block is the one where I'm the lead active portfolio manager. It's the one where I spend the most time, but I get to see these intersections and trends into other businesses all the time.
Yeah. I mean, it's awesome this because for me, it's one of the most interesting ETFs that has so much potential over the next sort of decade. So many interesting innovations that can come through it. So it's great.
To
Good
think
place to
we
be.
we only started it, what's it? So it's 2018 is when we launched. There was maybe 4 pure plays back then.
Yeah.
Now I can make the portfolio 100% with pure plays. Um, like the industry has
Yeah. It's
leaps and
changed. Yeah.
bounds in 5 years. When we started, we had 6 segments of the blockchain industry we looked at. We're now up to 8, right? Like there was concepts that didn't exist 5 years ago. Um, like
Yeah.
it was almost like science fiction 5 years ago, right? Ordinals was like back 5 years ago we were talking about coloring coins. That was the concept of ordinals back then. I know we're going to cover that later, but like the
But we
the
can. I mean, we
language
can
is
pick up on it now if
the
you want.
language has changed. It's
Yeah.
unbelievable to me. Um, so
And in case with ordinals,
mhm.
um, what's your view on ordinals? Do you see it as something that will actually drive more value from the Bitcoin blockchain, or is it the demise of Bitcoin as many hardcore believers believe?
so so I do not think it's the demise of Bitcoin. For me,
Mike, could you possibly just explain ordinals in a bit as well? Because there'll be a lot of people that don't
yeah.
fully understand what they are as well.
So the short version of what an ordinal is it's the ability to code some information above and beyond simply a transaction on a Bitcoin, or not even just a Bitcoin, a Satoshi, a block of code. Um, it's similar to many of the applications that have been thought of as smart contracts within other chains like Ethereum. Um, so it's adding a second layer of application to the original Bitcoin code. So you could see how purist could be like, oh my God, it's the end. No, this took, I don't know, 5 years of consensus building to get Taproot in there to eventually get to the
Yeah.
use of Taproot for ordinals. So for me, it's confirming of a theory that I've held probably since 2016, which is anything any other blockchain can do, Bitcoin can do better. Now, when I say that, it's not better right away. Without a doubt, smart contracts work better on other chains right now. The reason it's not better right away is because Bitcoin is actually decentralized and actually takes consensus. So change happens
Slower.
slower. Now, slower in the world of Bitcoin or crypto or blockchain is still light years faster than the world of government or human politics or whatever, or evolution. But it's still much, much slower, right? Like somebody wants to create some new chain, they come out, they go find some silly name, I don't know, I can't even think of one, Pet Rocks chain, right? And they create some sort of thing, and boom, it's out there, right? If that thing catches on, and Bitcoin is the dominant chain, eventually I believe whatever people like in another chain will be co-opted into Bitcoin. Slowly, maybe 5, 10, 15 years later. But to me, ordinals are really the Ethereum killer, right? It's proof. Now, that doesn't mean that Ethereum's gone. I seriously doubt Ethereum is gone. I think Ethereum has a lot of value. Uh, but I think over time, the best parts of Ethereum will be co-opted or merged into the Bitcoin base layer chain,
Okay.
or built on top in a secondary layer.
Yeah.
Um, and I think ordinals have proved that. Now, from a business standpoint, they've been a huge win for the miners because they weren't counting on that as revenue, right? So
Yes.
all of a sudden, they're not just getting rewarded with coins; they're making transaction fees for verifying movements of ordinals. Boom, that's extra revenue. They get pretty
Yeah.
excited about that.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I hadn't considered that. That's a good thing to. So the big miners have now got another revenue stream. Do you think has that been reflected in earnings to date, or is this? I can't remember when ordinals came out.
I think a lot of it was seen in the second quarter.
Yeah.
Um, Second, maybe you'll see some in the third quarter numbers, but I also think it's something that
Just a long term
it's
thing that
long
reflected.
term, makes a difference. It's zero extra cost to them,
Yeah.
so it's just incremental.
Great.
Now, I mean, the hype on it came and already slowed down. Not surprising, right? I mean,
Yeah.
of course, the first thing we did was make frog NFTs or whatever with this, ordinals. So it's not like we the hype went first. I wouldn't say it's going to be massively meaningful in the short run to their
Yeah. Yeah.
to their revenue. It was a nice minor surprise, but long term, I think it will be massively meaningful.
Yeah. And uh, just talking about the hype that's been around, obviously a lot of people have been talking about the ETFs, Bitcoin ETFs.
Mm.
So quickly, I thought we could just have a quick discussion on that. Um, do you think this will have a big impact on Bitcoin and crypto going forward, or do you see it as a potential downside risk as well? Because institutional traders get access to it. They can obviously play the long or short side of it. So you can see some quite big price swings related to them, pushing around the market. But I don't know if it's too big now for them to do that, or what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's not too big for them to push around the market. It's actually relatively small in terms of the flows that institutions could add to this, right? Like,
Yeah,
so what do we got in this race right now? So right now we have, I don't know, 10 or 12 spot Bitcoin requests from BlackRock, ARK and 21 shares, Bitwise, VanEck, Wisdom
yeah,
Tree, Valkyrie. They're all basically the same filing, and every time one of them updates it, the others follow. So yesterday, I know we don't like to say days, but recently Bitwise updated theirs and put a bunch of information in. So
yeah.
I expect all the others will follow suit. One of our partners, Hashdex, which already has a spot Bitcoin ETF in Brazil and has one in Europe and Bermuda,
Oh wow.
um, they have a filing out there to take an existing 33 Act futures fund and convert it to allow it to use futures and spot. I think that one's got a lot of legs. Now, obviously, I've biased because I helped with it, but I think it gives the regulators the opportunity to say, okay, this thing is going to transact on traditional financial rails, but settle in spot Bitcoin. So they don't have to worry about forcing the market makers, the APs, the clearinghouses to deal with Bitcoin. They can deal with futures, but the end investor ends up holding spot Bitcoin. So we actually have the ticker DeFi on that one, and it's already trading out there. It's amazing to me that Canada already has these. We own 4 spot Bitcoin ETFs inside BLOK, in
Yeah.
aggregate about a 4.5% position. Um, and we use the Canadian ones. There's some in Europe, there's some in Brazil, there's some in Bermuda, like there's some in actually right now I think in Asia they only have futures based ones. Um, so everybody's talked a lot about the significance of BlackRock jumping in. I don't think it's significant other than it shows that they know it's going to be a desired asset class. I don't think they know anything. I don't think they're ahead of anybody. I think that's all hype cycle. Um, then there was a big hype cycle on the Grayscale lawsuit. Not surprised they won. Have no idea what that really means other than the SEC has to come up with another reason to say no. Um, I do not believe Grayscale will ever convert to an ETF.
Mm.
I think they have to say that. I wish them the best, but you know, I don't see how it's in their best interest, and that could be very damaging to Bitcoin price if they do succeed, because obviously 20% ish wants out, right? So if it trades at NAV, I don't think they're staying in.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
they might ride that last wave or whatever, but we'll see. Um, I do commend them for forcing the hand of the regulators, because that has been the hardest thing for U.S. investors is regulation by enforcement instead of regulation by communicating, right? There are so many good companies out there just saying, tell us what you want us to do and we'll do it. Instead,
Yeah.
it's, hey, uh, you know, come here and we'll talk to you. And then you get there and they're like, oh no, we have no idea what we're doing. So good luck. And then people go and do what they think is right. And all of a sudden they get sued.
Yeah.
You know, what else is in that Bitcoin debate? Oh, everybody's focused on Coinbase being the custodian. That blows me away. Right after the SEC sues them, and
Yeah.
they, the so like that's interesting. It doesn't appear to be in the U.S. any company that really conforms to what they're calling the requirements for a qualified custodian. Um, so my opinion is maybe third quarter, fourth quarter next year, we'll see a spot Bitcoin ETF. I know Bloomberg and a lot of others are predicting, it's going to come this year. I give that almost a 0%
Yeah.
chance that we see it in 2023. Um, I think the approvals will start to come in March, April, May, June next year. And then the actual launches will probably be 2 to 3 months after that. I think there's
Yeah.
a whole bunch of questions that haven't been asked yet. Um, how are you going to clear this? And does the APs need to have an account with Coinbase? And
Yeah,
like all the traditional finance rails, I think the SEC usually would have worked this out with the issuers, but because they hung themselves to this not a regulated market, no surveillance sharing, they didn't get to a lot of the questions that still need to be worked out.
yeah, yeah. Of course, there's a lot to do.
A lot to do, a lot of wood to chop.
If anything we've learned, yeah, it's a slow process.
Yeah.
um, do you think Coinbase as the custodian for the BlackRock ETF, is that a big positive for them in terms of, if it all goes through and that's what they are, is that something they're going to drive real revenue from?
Yeah, I mean they absolutely will, but the reality is they're going to drive most of their revenue from the fact that the number is going to go up, right? You're going to
Yeah,
have massive amounts of money that just couldn't access this, couldn't hold it on the balance sheet. Their IPS, their rules for what they can and can't own, that just don't include, a digital asset held at a non-qualified custodian.
yeah,
Stick it in an ETF, now it's just the same as buying GLD,
yeah,
right? So that's the access point. This is really good for ETF investors. It's really good for traditional institutional investors. A big flux of money that doesn't understand it may not be good for Bitcoin. It might be great for the price. Uh, it'll be great for the miners. It won't be long lived, right? You were asking earlier, is this so big now that this time is different and the volatility is going to be out? And now, now we've just
yeah.
got larger sums of dumber money.
Got you. So be potentially even more swings
Potentially
than
even more
before.
swings. Yeah.
Um, so coming back to the Bitcoin miners, um, would you agree that there's a which makes sense, a very strong like positive correlation between their price and the Bitcoin price? I mean, I've seen some charts overlaid. It looks like they almost sort of match it with some degree of irregularity with the price. But is that something you've sort of seen as well? Yeah.
I think it's more like a leveraged play.
Okay.
Um, so I got into I'm gonna give a little digression story. Um, I used to work at a hedge fund mutual fund SMA shop called Horizon Kinetics, and in 2005 our biggest position was Newmont Mining, a gold mining stock. We owned it, as a deep value kind of company. That year gold went straight up. Newmont Mining did not, and it was because all of a sudden there was this ETF called GLD from State Street, and for the first time, people could get direct exposure to gold and didn't need a miner to get that exposure.
Interesting.
So Newmont historically has behaved like a leveraged version of gold, right? When it goes up, it goes up more. When it goes down more. Um, Same for what became GDX, the gold mining ETF. I think in the future, when we have spot Bitcoin as an ETF out there, you'll see that move with Bitcoin at 99% correlation. The futures ones are at 98% correlation. So it's not like we're far off, or 97, whatever. And then you'll have the miners. They'll have a high correlation, but when the spot goes up, they'll go up more because people will get more excited. They'll think there's a multiplier. And when the stock goes down or the spot goes down, the miners will take the hit more, right? Because they really don't have anything they can cut, right? The best miners, the asset that they have that makes them the best miners is usually twofold. They have somebody who understands energy arbitrage, and they have an amazing CFO. Those are the two differentiators when Dan Weisskopf and Ryan, my team of analysts, Will, are looking for Bitcoin miners. Like there's maybe 12 or 15 public ones, depending on where your market cap level is that you're willing to stomach. I think right now we own 7.
Yeah.
And what we're looking for is balance sheet slash CFO, somebody who knows how to get through the winters, the bear cycles, knows how to get the right machines financed properly, deal with traditional finance, deal with the PFIC issues, deal with all the crap in traditional finance. Um, that's extremely important. And then on the other side, it's energy arbitrage. Riot's probably the greatest example of that, right? they'll turn off the machine sometimes because they can make more money by getting credits back on the energy, right? Like, so it's strange because the miners that do the best are not the big believers. They're not the maxis. They're the ones who are looking at it as a financial arbitrage, regulatory arbitrage, energy arbitrage business.
And but they still, so coming back to, I had a question about Mara and Riot. They still hold a lot of Bitcoin on their balance sheet. I think something like 5 to 6 billion or something.
Yeah.
Is around that amount. They're quite similar, I think. And then I was thinking about, so MicroStrategy, obviously, I've got a huge amount of Bitcoin on their balance sheet. I think it's about 10x that. And in the event of the price of Bitcoin that just goes up over time, which ones of these companies are going to benefit most from an increase in the Bitcoin price? Because they're slightly different companies. Obviously, MicroStrategy is not just, I believe they've been working on additional technologies, in blockchain. So there's some other possibilities there for them, but obviously their biggest and most well-known way to make profit is the amount of Bitcoin they've got. How do you see them differing when the price of Bitcoin goes up?
So obviously, Michael Saylor has done his homework. Michael Saylor is the chairman and founder of MicroStrategies, and has decided to focus on building applications on Lightning and keeping his software/cloud business live, and whatever profits he has, he reinvests into Bitcoin. He must have gone down the path of saying, is it better for me to spend $100 million to buy Bitcoin directly, or to spend $100 million to buy miners and mine it? And at some point he looked at it and said, it makes more sense for me to buy and hold than it does for me to mine. Why does that work for him versus these others making the decision to mine it? Well, he was an already established business with a balance sheet and a shit ton of cash that he couldn't reinvest to get a return on. So that's where he comes up with his, what he calls his macro strategy, right? To buy Bitcoin with his balance sheet.
Yeah.
The capital intensive nature of a miner works great for a startup that's raising venture money, and many of these came public through SPACs and all of that. If they get to a certain size, and mining obviously continues to get harder with difficulty rates, hash rates, halvings, it makes more sense for them to adapt his strategy. Right. So his strategy works for him because he had an established business that he was changing. Mara's strategy, Riot strategy work for them because they're in gobble up growth mode, right? With good CFOs who are figuring out this. Which one's a more stable business? Well, obviously MicroStrategies, right? It's simple. However, Bitcoin goes up 100%, MicroStrategies will probably go up 100%. Bitcoin goes up 100%, Riot and Mara will probably go up 150 to 200 because they're leveraged plays on it. Same on the other side though, right? Bitcoin goes down 50. Mara and Riot are going to be down 70. Micro will probably be down about 50. It's going to have a higher correlation. Less risk, more correlation.
Yeah, I've got you. And they're a levered play. Why in comparison to MicroStrategy?
MicroStrategy does not need to invest in new machines to keep its Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Right. Mara and Riot have to go through upgrade cycles. I've been to these farms. I've been to Riot's Waystone. There is constant. I mean,
Are they huge?
Windstone. It's huge. It's acres, and there's tractors and transformers, and the people there, they're not excited about Bitcoin. They're excited about how they figure out immersion. They're excited about how they figure out a new way to cool something, a new way to rack something, a new way to get a transformer, a new way to get arbitrage on the energy. Like, it's like a culture that almost like they don't even care about well, I don't want to say that. The senior management do care about the technology of blockchain and Bitcoin, but the average person working there doesn't even really care. To them, it's just a server farm that they want to run as efficiently as possible.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'd love to go see those. Although it's just like rows and rows of servers, it must be pretty impressive.
There,
Going
it
there.
depends on. So each one is different, right? So I've seen where they take what are they called, the shipping containers, and turn them into miners. That's kind of a standardized thing. That's probably not something people will do much more of in the future. I've seen big Tyvek buildings, where they're insulated that way, so it's easy to cool. I've been to a mine in North Carolina where it doesn't snow, right? It'll snow all around the mine, but the snow can't land on the property where the mine is because it's so much heat being
Oh my
dispersed.
gosh.
So they actually have like a partnership with one of the universities to do like agriculture on the mine. And it used to be an industrial factory that had a cooling system by taking water out of the mountain, and they re-brought that cooling system back. So
Wow,
it's pretty amazing stuff, man.
that's awesome.
The innovations you see at these mines and the way they solve problems. Uh, Recently, I got to go to the one in Texas and see the immersion for the first time.
Yeah.
Which immersion, for those who don't know, most when you run these machines, they generate heat. Um, I actually had a friend who worked at Fidelity who got a miner. He lived in north of LA, so pretty mild some winters. But he would run a miner uh, to heat a room. Now the fans that cool them can be quite loud. So what you see is they won't sell immersion machines. Bitmain doesn't sell them. Nobody sells immersion machines. So you have to buy the machine whole. Then you have to take the fan off. You have to burn out the chip that tells it to cool itself. Then you put it in a like I guess almost like a man-made river of what is essentially baby oil, and you move the baby oil across them, and that keeps them cool and
Wow.
allows you to clock them harder to get them to run more efficiently, and then they just recycle that oil constantly. So you'll go into this one room and it'll sound just a constant like a hornet's nest, very loud hornet's nest, and there'll be some sort of central place to push the air up, and then you'll go into the next room and it sounds like a babbling brook, right? Like almost like a Zen garden. Um, so yeah, the innovations are quite amazing.
Yeah, that's incredible. Um, Talking about innovations, I thought we could just touch on Overstock as well because I know it's one of your one of the interesting holdings of the ETF, and because they have a venture arm that holds numerous different stakes in blockchain focused businesses. Anything developed there in the last sort of 3 months? I know that's
Yeah.
quite a short time period, but or just maybe highlighting a few of the most interesting things that they're working on.
So yeah, I think we're the only, like, I think there's like 10 or 15 other blockchain ETFs that are much smaller, and most of them are passive. I think we're the only ones who still own Overstock, and it's strange to me, right? Like, 'cause it was one of the coolest names when the fund first came out. Our relationship with Overstock has been up and down multiple times in terms of size of position. We actually reduced it substantially this summer after an amazing run, because the news cycle on it went from the parts I care about, like T0 or Settlement or Pure Nova. These are all blockchain ventures that they're financing or own. We got very excited about Grain Chain because so much has happened with grains in response to the Ukraine
Yeah.
invasion and everything. Grain Chain's basically a way to, it's kind of like a way to trade and settle sugar, soybean, coffee, things like that. But in markets where they don't have our futures that we have in the U.S. or the developed markets, so it's a way for them to hedge themselves in Argentina or Brazil or places like that. Um, so exciting things there. But the news cycle on Overstock went from things happening there to them buying Bed Bath Beyond's leftover assets. So when we saw that, we got a nice little win on some of the price movement. Took a big reduction in the amount of it or percentage we wanted to keep in the portfolio
Yeah.
because right now it's way more a retailer and a turnaround story on a depressed asset than it is about the blockchain component.
Hmm.
So to us, it's still an extremely important position, but again, we took quite a bit of profits on it this year.
Yeah. And I thought another one of the holdings, the BLOK ETF, Roblox. Um, you've mentioned it's a pure play on the metaverse and the mobile gaming themes, and I thought you shed some more light on that.
Yeah, so like we hinted at earlier when we were talking about AI, um, for the metaverse to work, and there's a long way to go. Uh, hence, you could see the pivot at Facebook or whatever they want to call themselves today.
Yeah.
Right? Oh, we're a metaverse company. Oh no, wait, we're just gonna copy TikTok. uh, there's a long way to go. But for the
Yeah.
metaverse to work, just like for AI to work, there needs to be some form of decentralization, and that tends to be where the intersection is between blockchain and metaverse. So I would not say Roblox is a pure play blockchain company. I would say it's a pure play metaverse company, and we know that's going to be a meaningful part of the um, the blockchain community in the future. So
Yeah.
Roblox was the place where we found the most interesting way to get the exposure. We started really small, and every time the market made it smaller, we bit off some more. Um, so to me, this is a core position that we're building over time. I
Okay.
don't know when it's going to see the catalyst and the realization. Um, I do think it's going to have some AI impact as well. So I'm excited about the company and what it brings to the portfolio that is very different from everything else in the portfolio.
Yeah. Yeah. And just coming back to the last 3 months, I think, is there any other things in the BLOK ETF? Any big developments? We talked about a few already. It'd be great to get an update from you on other
Sure.
things that have been moving.
So
And looking forward,
yeah.
what are you perceive might happen?
So most of our summer was spent taking profits. um,
Yeah.
right? Because we had a
Oh, good
great
timing.
yeah, a great Q1, great Q2, right? Participated a lot in the miners. We have a discipline where we don't let things stay above 5%. So simply being forced to take profits on things
Yeah.
that did extremely well and then redeploy to new things like adding to Roblox, adding to PayPal, adding to um, Riot, and then some. I don't want to say fully new names, but names that have come back. So there's two positions that we owned 5 years ago and exited maybe 2 or 3 years ago that we've brought back, and mainly because they talked about blockchain 5 years ago, but never fully executed,
Yeah.
and then now they're back to execution. And so one of the things we wanted to look for were more non-US emerging market plays. So two that were in the original portfolio that are now back. One is called Wipro, which is a tech firm in India. I was really looking for something interesting in India, and that's the one that Weisskopf really decided to go with. And that they've engaged with us. We've talked to them. We see where they're going. The other one is Opera, which is a search engine that's mostly used in
Yeah.
the emerging markets, but they also do peer-to-peer lending, micro lending. They used to have a whole blockchain section on their website, but every time you talk to them, you couldn't get a straight answer. Now, so we exited because when management can't give us a straight answer, we're out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now they're back. They're fully engaged, and I think they're going to make some amazing impacts in the emerging markets with an existing client base. Um, yeah,
So they got the distribution there. Yeah.
yeah. So those are some kinds of ways we've pivoted over the summer. I would say took some profits on some miners, pivoted to some more emerging market, smaller names. Not all small, because we brought in Alibaba, small positions in some of the e-commerce stuff that's been beat up, that's interconnected with blockchain.
And you're still in PayPal, I
Oh,
believe.
absolutely, yeah.
What are your thoughts on the new PayPal stablecoin?
So, man, this is gonna come off the wrong way. I know it, but and I mean, I think it's just a rose by any other name is still a rose. Like, all it is using blockchain to account for the movement of money in a zero settlement, right? So it's not really any different than an accounting system. They're just calling it a stable coin,
Yeah, okay.
right? So, like, to me, there's no code like Bitcoin where you could take it and it's fungible and all that. To
Yeah,
me,
yeah.
it's just an accounting system, using blockchain and zero time settlement. It's a good story, and it probably will work well, but nobody's ever going to take a, what do we call a PYUSD off of
Yeah,
PayPal and bring it somewhere else, right? It's
yeah,
going to exist inside PayPal. It's kind of like all these other companies, like these settlement companies, uh, Securrency and things like that. They're just accounting systems using blockchain. So to me, it's a stable coin for marketing purposes. For reality purposes, it's an accounting system.
So yeah, so innovation's not really there, or the use case that you'd like to see from a stablecoin. However, theoretically, it could be a way for PayPal to get more mass adoption of blockchain. People using
Yeah,
PayPal for blockchain related things. Yeah,
absolutely. There's nobody who's going to make a good stable coin right now,
yeah,
because if you did, the Gary Gensler's going to knock on your door, right? So the PayPal stablecoin is most essentially an accounting system, right? USDC was real. Tether is what it is, but just people start using it for real, they're going to get a knock on the door, and there's going to be like, hey, we didn't tell you this, but
yeah,
we think this might be a security, and we're not even going to say we're sure, but we're going to tie you up in the courts for a couple of years for no reason. Sorry,
yeah.
like
That's crazy, isn't it?
yeah.
There's been a drawn out nightmare. I don't know how long's Gary Gensler stay in this position for. We've got
It
many more
doesn't.
years.
It's not. It's Gary's not the problem. It's that
Okay.
at the top levels of our government, there's no decision made on whether or not they want to embrace this
So
or not.
potentially the new elections round the corner-ish, a year and a bit away, is it? So you might find a different approach to it, or
I don't know. We
unless
had a
Biden's still in charge.
Republican administration, and at that time we had what's his name, Clayton, in there, and he was
Yeah.
totally against this shit. Then we got a Democratic one. We put Gensler in there. Oh, he MIT, this and that. He loves this stuff. No, he doesn't
Yeah.
matter what he thinks. It
Okay.
matters what his bosses are telling him. Because as soon as Clayton left, he's lobbying for these companies. Right?
Yeah.
So
Crazy.
I don't think it's about Gary Gensler. I think it's about Congress or the administration needs to give clarity. This whole idea that the SEC is going to decide the U.S. government's stance on crypto was always a farce, right?
Yeah.
That's the SEC is there to protect investors, not to make monetary policy, right? Like,
Yeah. Right.
yeah,
But I get it. So yeah, just indecision at the top.
yep.
Probably because they've not been super warm to it, so that's where the indecision's coming from, isn't it?
The
A
indecision
lot of
comes
them.
from this makes them irrelevant. And if they
Yeah.
can't control the money, how can they
Yeah.
control
Yes.
anything? Like,
Mhm.
it,
So
it's not.
control, power, and
It's
control.
power and control. It's not surprising that they're against it.
Resistance.
It's
Yeah.
just amazing that they've been able to control the narrative and let Gary be the fall guy.
Yeah. Crazy. Well, Mike, it's been a wonderful time to speak to you again, and I hope we get a chance to do it again soon.
Okay, thank you.